listening to the Photofocus podcast. Welcome to the Photofocus podcast. My name is Rich Harrington, and this is episode 107. And this week we are joined by two great guests. We have both Scott Bourne and RC Concepcion. Scott, could you say hello for him real quick?
Hey, everybody. It's so nice to be on this end of the microphone.
And RC, for those who haven't met you, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Hey, everybody. My name is RC. I am a content developer and one of the Photoshop guys over at Kelby Media Group. So I'm the host of D-Town TV, wrote a bunch of books, blah, blah, blah. But more importantly, I'm just excited to be on the phone with you guys. I think it's going to be good. I'm excited.
Great.
Well, I'm going to jump in because RC's too humble.
He's being a little modest, isn't he?
He's one of the best photographic storytellers in the land.
Oh, dude, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Seriously.
I'm always just like, oh, well, I just take pictures every now and again.
Yeah, when you do, they turn to. It's like I'm going to start standing next to you more often because you seem to see stuff I don't.
Well, let's put this in perspective off of that statement. RC was up in Washington, D.C., I guess it was last week for Photoshop World, and he stopped by my studio. He ran outside and played with a certain camera we'll talk about later. And he comes back in. I'm like, oh, that's a nice picture. He's like, yeah, I took it right by your garbage dump. I'm like, great. He took a beautiful headshot with the dumpster as a background.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that kind of signifies your skill. And it wasn't even an HDR, so it was good.
No, just think fast. So
last week, RC, you dug pretty deep in. We had Photoshop World. The Photoshop CS6 Public Beta just came out, and this is out there free for people to start to work with. More than 500,000 downloads in the first week, which is pretty insane. What are some of your initial thoughts? You've obviously been playing with this for a while. What stands out as maybe your top 3 features that people need to be downloading and trying?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think that one of the testaments to what Adobe's done here is they've really kind of taken the performance of Photoshop and made it so much better, added some great features to it, and I think that seeing almost 500,000 downloads is kind of a testament to that. I think they've done a really, really good job. But there's a couple of standout features for me. I think one of the things that I think that they've done that's really, really well is the interface. When you're working with Photoshop, it's almost kind of like you can tell that it's been cobbled together by a whole bunch of different setups, right? So it's this dialog box here, there's a scrub box over here.
Well, 20 plus years of software development can kind of do that, couldn't it? It's not like it got built overnight.
Yeah, it just kind of creates like this little ugly baby. Where all of a sudden it's
21 years in the making. Okay, so we started fresh.
Ugly baby. And one of the things that they did is they went back and they just kind of scrubbed it down and the UI design. And I think that it's important, like when people start working on software, and I think, if you look at Apple and you look at all these kinds of things, how something looks is about as important as what it does. And I think that Photoshop definitely spent some time kind of taking a look at itself and taking a look at how to be able to trim and clean and make things look a lot nicer. So the overall experience, I think, looks really, really good.
Now, Scott, when you took a chance and looked at it, did it, I really like it, but did it feel a little bit like Aperture to you, Scott, when you looked at it?
Well, I don't use Photoshop as much as you guys do. I live mostly in Aperture, but I was excited to see the video editing features, and I was also excited to see that they finally quit trying to pay umbrage to Photoshop 1.0, and we got a brand new interface, which makes a lot more sense. And the program just feels zippier to me. I was running it on a MacBook Air, and it was, wow. I mean, it was zippy. I think they've made better use of resources. I'm very excited to learn more, but I'm really bummed about one thing.
Which is?
And that is that the ACR upgrades don't work with 6. They work with 5, which meant I was in Alaska with a 5D Mark III and no way to convert my RAW files.
We kind of ran into that too, RC, didn't we, when we were playing with the D800?
Yeah, that's right.
So, Scott, you're absolutely right. It definitely seems faster. RC, any thoughts as to what's helping out there?
Yeah, well, I think that they've added a couple of different things like under the hood. You'll hear a lot about things like the Adobe Mercury playback engine. being inside, or that technology being inside of Photoshop. So I think that there's a couple of key features that you're going to see inside of there are going to be working a lot faster. So I think that the performance is going to be really, really good there. And I think that's one of my other real favorite features.
And I think you bring up a good point there. This is now just a 64-bit application on the Mac side. On the Windows side, they still have the 32-bit version, but not for Vista. So they're using more modern computing stuff, getting that graphics card really big, impress things. Some of the filters like the blurs and such, really taking advantage of that graphics card. So I think maybe we all agree. We've all kind of danced around this. My favorite feature, and I think, Scott, you like this too, is the video editing, which sounds kind of strange.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. The video's awesome.
It's so simple, even I can do it, which means anybody from the age of 3 down can.
That was one of those things that very early on we were shown a demo of it, and I remember seeing something and going, oh, God, here they go again with this video. Because video was okay, kind of, if by okay you mean like totally unusable in CS5. It was just...
It opened things.
It opened stuff. You could see it, and it was like, okay, it's nice that you tried, but, put it on the refrigerator wall. But it was, but now when they showed us this demo, I was like, yes, yes, yes. Because, really, a lot of photographers are out there, and they have these cameras that are doing stills and they're doing video. And what's happening with this is all of these people kind of dance with it, and they play with it, and they record a little bit of videos, and they do some stuff, and they're like, all right, well, I got some video, but what am I going to do with it? And the answer for the longest time was, all right, well, go to Premiere, go to Final Cut Pro, or, try your hand at iMovie. And these things have gotten really complex. And a lot of photographers are just kind of like, I don't want to learn something else. I just want to be able to take what I have and just kind of leverage that. And I don't want to go and learn something new or go back to school and do something new. And I think that that's one of the things that Photoshop did, was they took video and they stripped all of these different components off of it and only gave you the things that you need.
I play in both fields of photo and video, and at Photoshop World, I gave a couple demos on this, talked to a lot of folks. I'm really excited by what they did. The team actually pulled me in really early on this, and we were looking at it. And I think, I would say that they got a good, solid A-level thing here. It's super easy to use. You can add an extra audio track. You could do some titling. I think color correction is out of the park easy. It's great. But it's not, a couple people are like, well, what happens if I have to do this or this? It's not meant to take the place of Premiere or something where you've got a large project with lots of organization. But, drop in a few photos, have a few video clips, put together short form content, especially for the web. I think it's a great tool for that.
That's exactly what I think. It's just, if you start looking for more stuff, then congratulations, you've graduated out of Photoshop. Go to Premiere.
I do think I think the color correction is great, though. It's going to be just like anything else you already do. It's super easy. And I think, Scott, you nailed it. This is designed for people who want to mix photos and video together. And, I know you've played in Premiere, and you like a lot part of it, but I'm sure Photoshop's going to feel more comfortable because it's designed for photographers.
Listen, unless I've got you at my side, Premiere's over my head. So the idea here is I can see billions of hours of video footage from DSLRs now coming off of hard drives, finally dusting off cobwebs and being put to use. I got 2 quick things I want to say about this before we move on. One, content-aware move. Can we have a big hell yes for that?
That's quite nice. And for those who haven't seen it, it allows you to basically select an object and recompose it in the frame, and it does selections, and it does the background blending. So it's sort of like 3 tools got together and made a new little baby, and the baby was the coolest thing ever.
And I'm going to say this as a hardcore, like probably known as the most hardcore aperture user on the planet. The first guy to be T3 certified by Apple, the first guy to teach a public class in aperture, edited 9 books on aperture. But I'll say this is the best Photoshop ever. It's not, sometimes when we see the Photoshop, we're like, well, should I upgrade? Or will this, can I wait? This is a must upgrade version, period.
Yeah, and I think what's really nice here is 2 things. One, the team wasn't having to focus on the big hard stuff that's terribly unsexy, like how do we make it run in 64-bit? They had all the performance stuff down. Now it was just like, let's make it faster. Let's add cool features. And I think the greatest thing, and RC, we don't need to go into each one of these, but they have this concept of a JDI, just do it. They ticked off so many little things that annoy people while also putting in the big stuff. how does it feel when you run with it? You've been using it probably longer than anyone here.
Yeah, it feels cleaner. It feels faster. It feels like all of these little tiny things that they've worked with, little things that had just annoyed you. Like here's just one example where you can kind of see the fit and finish of it really kind of shine through. If I do a lot of retouching, so when you're doing retouching, you spend a lot of time inside of the liquefy tool. Now, liquefy is one of those things that kind of moves portions of bodies, and you can move faces, and you can tuck things in and pull things out.
It gets rid of double chins and love handles.
Yeah, double chin and love handle tool. It's one of those things where before it was kind of like you pressed it and you hoped and you waited and you're like, oh, come on, just do something. Now, the moment that you jump into it, it's fast. It's really, really fast. And a limitation of it was that the brush would only go up to 1,500 pixels. So a lot of the times when you were trying to do a major change, you had to kind of take it in segments, and that kind of stuff cumulatively makes it a lot harder for you to do your job. Now you can have a super, super big brush, and you can kind of move in and out and move around, and it's just a lot faster. So I think it's a very, very, very robust upgrade, and I think that you're going to see a lot of people immediately do that come the time of the release.
I think the rest of the other second 500,000 folks, our listeners can just head on over to labs.adobe.com and download the public beta. It's totally free. You don't even have to be a Photoshop customer to try it. Of course, that public beta at a certain point in time when the software starts shipping will probably stop working, and you'll need to become a customer or upgrade to stay it. But I think Adobe's onto something here, letting people see the excitement within this one app, and of course the rest of CS6 is expected as well. Now, RC, you're well known as an HDR photographer. You've done a best-selling book on this topic. Anything new with HDR? Or
they've made some changes inside of the smoothness for it, and they've added a couple of different presets inside of there. So there are some small changes that they've done for that. All in all, it's the experience with HDR is a similar experience, but I am noticing that the changes that they've done to it make it a little bit nicer, I think. So I think that they're very, very welcome changes.
Are you still relying on any third-party tools? Scott, do you have any favorites?
I kind of bounce back and forth between a trio of things. I use Photomatics, I use Nik HDR Effects Pro, and then I bring in some, HDR stuff from some lesser-known third-party things. I kind of mix and match and build my own form of spaghetti. I didn't have time to test the HDR features in the 5D Mark III that are built in while I was in Alaska because I was too busy just shooting the eagles. But that's something I'm going to look at. But, I don't think there's one perfect solution. I like to really get in there and layer stuff on top of each other and make certain parts of the image look good. I was taught that by a guy named Trey Ratcliffe.
Yeah. How about for you, RC? Is Photoshop going to play a bigger role, or are you still going to find yourself using Photomatics or Nik or some other tool set?
Well, I mean, I think that the important thing, and unfortunately, this is something where I'm asked all the time about it, and unfortunately, there's no nice answer to it. When you look at different pieces of software like Photoshop, like Photomatics, like HDR Effects Pro, one of them isn't inherently better than the other. And I think that there's this kind of general idea that there's an advantage or another advantage. And there is an advantage in another way, and I'll talk about that in a second. But it's almost as if all of these HDR algorithms and these formulas that are used to be able to produce this is very, very much like, and I talk about this in the book, it's very much like a guitar and a sound of a guitar. I always make this analogy. If you're a blues guy and you listen to B.B. King, you can hear a B.B. King sound from a mile away, and you go, you know what? That's B.B. King. That's blues music. If you listen to Metallica, you know what a Metallica sounds like. You know what that sound sounds like. So everything has its own fingerprint, and it has its own individual sound. When you use Photomatics, it has a very specific look. It has a very specific sound. When you use Photoshop, it has a very specific sound. So it's not that one is better than another. It's just that they sound differently, and you'll find that whenever you need one thing, you go one way. Whenever you need something else, you go somewhere else. The reason that I'm very partial to something like HDR Effects Pro is that they've done a lot of different sounds in one spot. So you can, they have this thing called an HDR method, and they have all these little drop downs. So it's almost kind of like you can make it sound very differently depending on what it is that you need. But at the end of the day, not one isn't better than another. You've gotten into a very, very expensive habit, which is photography.
Yeah, made more expensive by the fact that now you insist on taking 5 to 9 pictures of the same subject and putting them all together instead of just one.
Yeah, exactly. So so at the end of the day, I don't look at these things as better than another. They're just tools. They're just tools to make things nicer, and play with the one that you like. I tend to like HDRFX Pro. I still dabble in Photomatics. But I do, truthfully, one of the things that a lot of people really need to know is that whenever you're working with HDR, the moment that you finish tone mapping and you hit save, that's the moment that your HDR file starts. Everybody forgets about the fact that there is a lot of post-processing that happens to that HDR file. Whenever you see something that quite doesn't look really, really good, it's because people haven't taken it through Photoshop. They haven't taken it through plugins. They haven't done all of these other things that the pros do to make their images look the way that it do. It's a very, very plug-in, very, very post-process driven art form, and one of those, and people need to know that.
So, RC, where can people go?
Is there a rolling pedal, effects pedal that I can use for my HDR?
Oh my God! You know what? My thing is Color Effects Pro. Color Effects Pro 4 is like the pedal to use.
Yeah, I use it. I find myself using it a whole lot more than I used to use. Photomatics as the first line of defense, and then maybe something else. RC and I were both lucky enough to be invited down to Nick Software in San Diego to test this thing out as beta when it first came out, and I wasn't quite sure about it then, but now I'm down to the point where I use it every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, whether I use, I'll go to Photomatics and I'll use Photomatics. I still think it's very cool. I'll use HDRFX Pro. I still think it's very cool. But there isn't an HDR that I don't do that doesn't go through Color Effects Pro. So for me, that finishing, that's an amazing, amazing program to be able to get some really nice looks out of it. And it's just a tool. It's just something to take that HDR to the next level. I tend to, there's one effect inside of Color Effects Pro called Glamour Glow. And it's a portrait effect. It was made to soften skin and things like that. But you run that against an HDR, it's like night and day. It just makes it look so good.
Well, I actually started playing with another tool set, too. I've been trying the Tiffin, the DFX line, because they have this sort of a subset called Light that does a nice job of pulling up some of the glows and adding some light into a scene. So, yeah, I think you're definitely hitting it here, which is that there is no one tool, and people need to be a little bit more open and try bouncing and developing a good workflow. Now, where can people see some samples of your images, RC, if they want to explore it a little bit more?
You can go to www.aboutrc.com. I have some pictures there. You can also go to 500px. I have a lot of pictures on that side. It's go to 500px. So it's 500px.com/aboutrc. Or you can find me at Google+. You could just go to gplusrc.com.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, man.
Is there anything from kelbytraining.com on HDR that you've done?
Yeah. Actually, I have, I have 1, 2, 3 apps that I've done on the iPad. I've got a couple of courses that are on the Kelby Training site.
So this might be a good opportune moment for me to mention something, RC.
Okay.
Thanks for the setup.
As of this show, Kelby Training is a proud sponsor of the Photofocus podcast. And if you'd like to learn from Rich and from RC and from a cadre of some of the best teachers in the world, and if you'd like to save $20 on an annual subscription, Mr. Kelby and Associates have arranged for us to give you a $20 coupon. You need to use this code, though, KT S like Scott, B like boy, A like Alpha 12, KTSBA 12. And if you don't want to write that down, you can find it at the photofocus.com homepage. This is an amazing deal, $20 off from, this is like the cost of a hotel at one of these conferences to get a whole year of the very best training I've seen online. And I've seen your stuff, RC. It rocks. It's worth it just for that. So save $20, use the code KTSBA 12, and we're really proud to be associated now with KelbyTraining.com here at Photofocus.
Oh, thanks so much, Scott. It's one of those things where it's like, we could always count on people like you to evangelize and sound the horn for that stuff. But I'm very, very proud to be part of the team here. There's just amazing stuff. And I think that you're absolutely right. If you look at the price that's on something like that, and you compare it to the amount of things that you get, it's just amazing.
I think Rich loses that much change in his couch every week.
No, I have 2 kids. There's lots of ways to lose that much money.
I also want to briefly mention our friends borrowlenses.com, and I want to tell you something special about them. They are the first rental house to get all the new current cameras, the Canon 5D Mark III, the Nikon D800, the Nikon D4. Nobody's got the 1DX yet, but they also have the C300 Canon in both EF and PL mount, even the Red Epic, Red Scarlet, and Red and Zeiss video glass. All that stuff is available at borrowlenses.com. Also a sponsor here at Photofocus. Mr. Harrington, what's the next topic?
Well, that's a perfect setup because the Nikon D800, RC and I both got our hands on one and played with it a little bit. And
I don't want to hear about it.
I know. We'll get you one, Scott. I'll use my connections. The camera itself, everyone's so concerned because of the really high megapixel count, and we did 2 things. We played with the camera a little bit. I'm taking on a trip next week, and I'm going to be shooting with it for a whole week, so I'll have stronger opinions, but it just made it through the DxO test and the labs, and they gave it its highest score. That they said that this is the best sensor they've tested on any DSLR. So
at what ISO?
On the lower ISOs, they ranked it at 3rd, but for just using sort of the mid-range, they said that it behaved very, very well. So in the standard sort of shooting modes. I'll pull up the whole score here. But it looked pretty solid. They basically said that they give an overall score of 95, and they said that they were happy with it up to about 2800 ISO for low light performance. Said it behaved well. RC, you had some practical time with it too, just a few images, but any thoughts?
You know what? I liked it a lot. I like the. I tend to rank everything by kind of like a personal experience, an emotional experience when I'm playing with it, and then I look at the technical part second. But one of the things that I was concerned about was when I heard 36 megapixels, I'm like, man, that's like pushing into the D3X territory. All right, but so what's it going to be? Is it going to be stripped down D3X, or is it going to be an augmented D700? Where is it going to fit? And as much as I love the 700, there were a couple of things that I didn't like. Like I didn't like how it felt small in my hands. It didn't feel very substantial.
It wasn't a very manly camera.
Yeah, and it just didn't feel substantial. I needed to be able to put my hands on it. And I remember I was sitting at the office with you and we opened it up, and you handed it to me, and I remember grabbing it, and I was like, this feels good. The ergonomics, the fit, I'm like, it just felt really, really nice. So that I thought I was very, very happy to see that. Taking it out and putting it through its paces and doing some images, I love the detail that came out of it. It performed very, very well. The files looked great. The one thing that I think that a lot of people haven't put together in their head yet when it comes to this is what 36 megapixels means from a processing standpoint.
Yeah.
You know,
You got a lot of hard drive space, do you?
Exactly. I was looking. I went back and I took a look at my D3S. So I shoot predominantly with the D3S, and my RAW files are usually 12.7 megs in size. A RAW file from D800 is 40 megs.
I think I buy stock in the Pegasus R6 company.
It's just one of those things where it's just like, you got to be kidding me. And it's a big file, and you see it. Like when you try to zoom in Lightroom, it's like waiting. It's like, you're going to need more RAM. You're going to need, probably bigger cards. You're going to need a better processor.
And that brings up the definite issue there because, if you are shooting in a RAW-based workflow, it's not like JPEG or TIFF where you could say, oh, well, let's just down-convert that or let's discard some of the information away. We do obviously have workflows like compressed DNGs and things that we can use to pull it down. To answer your earlier question, Scott, they have it compared to a handful of other cameras, like they've got the 5D Mark II here, and it showed basically the same signal-to-noise ratio across all the ISOs as the 5D Mark II, if not slightly better. It only when it got into above 6400, then the 5D fell off much quicker than the D800. But the D800 is actually looking just as strong as the 5D Mark II was. And then they have it, compared to the D7000, a camera we both use, looked relatively comparable on the noise ratio. But they just said that very, very strong for the overall dynamic range of the image, and the low light performance definitely up there with everything else. So it looks like maybe they didn't make or screw things up too much by packing the megapixels, that it's comparable to everything else and then has some other good performance issues with it in general.
I'm skeptical still. I got to wait till I test one, but I can tell you what, I like the D4.
Yeah. Yeah.
The D4 is an incremental upgrade. Let's get that out there. It's not a wow, they did all these cool new things. It's only an incremental upgrade. If you have a D3S, unless you're just made of money, I don't know, maybe you wait for the D4S.
The backlit buttons weren't reason enough for the upgrade?
Well, I do have to admit that is my favorite feature.
I was going to say, I love the backlit button.
And it reminds me of my MacBook Air with the backlit keyboard. But, I mean, the problem I really have, to be honest with you, is like RC, I shoot a lot with a D3S. And I found myself missing tons of shots in Alaska because, the buttons are all moved and the stuff isn't where it's supposed to be. And it's like starting over. And I was just cussing that thing right and left. And, I think it's a great camera, great autofocus. I posted shots on the blog, the photofocus.com blog. I think it speaks for itself. But, I got to say, as a current D3S user, I think it's a great camera, but I want to see what the D4S is. It's a bigger jump. Now, if you're video, though, and you're Nikon, that might be the reason to upgrade, because they finally, I think, have caught up to Canon, or at least gotten pretty darn close.
I think they've actually passed Canon in that they have the clean HDMI output, and I'm going to do some hardcore tests. I've got access to the 5D Mark III and access to this. I'm going to do my own tests, so in a couple coming weeks, we'll be able to take a look at that, and I'll do some good testing. Now, speaking, though, of Canon and video, sort of the big fusion camera, the C300, just got approved for use on air for the BBC. And BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, pretty reputable group. This is really the first camera of this class to get a blessing. I have heard of a few shows at Discovery using this camera, too, for the Discovery Channel. What's this do for photographers, Scott? Do you think we're starting to see more doors opening for people who have a photography background being able to access similar technology and lensing?
Well, these things are still very expensive. I've got one coming, and I'm looking forward to it, but I still think this is probably a pretty big leap. It's something to consider instead of the red. I have to admit, the only thing I wish it did, I wish it was a 5K camera, because then you could do stills from it.
Right. Yeah, well, that's probably coming. Obviously we're just guessing here, but the logical path, this is just one more of those cameras that's showing the collision of photography and video being on the same path and opportunities for both.
What's it really cost to run this puppy? Really?
About $25,000.
Okay. I think this is going to be a short conversation.
Yeah.
But see, here's the thing, though. As a photographer who's kind of played with video, and I'm that photographer who I drive around, and a lot of the stuff that I do is very music based. So I listen to a lot of music, and I see scenes in my head. I think that there's a lot of photographers that are out there that are like me. I think that there's a lot of photographers that are out there that one image is nice, but you kind of want to set a mood and you want to do these kinds of things. And I think that they're video curious, if you will, to borrow a Trey term. But now it's kind of getting to a point where it's just like a fever pitch. You're beginning to see this intersection of these two technologies, and it's a great time to want to try it now. So I'm pumped. I can't wait. That my biggest problem right now is being a D3S shooter. Right, bringing it back to the D3S. I just don't know which way to go. I saw the D4. I like the backlit buttons. I do a lot of night work, HDR, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, when it first came out, I was like, great, that's what I want to do. I'm going to the D4. I'm selling the D3S, so the D3S is going to be my backup camera, and I'll just buy the D4. Then the D800 came out, and I'm like, well, it does the same things video-wise, right? So you have the inputs, you have the monitors, you have 1080p, it does, 30, does 24.
Yeah, they're basically identical for video.
And I'm like, now what do I do? I don't know what to do.
Well, you want to know the Nikon answer, right? You just buy both. Why choose? So yeah, obviously it's getting exciting, and we're all, for many people, some of the listeners are sick of hearing about video, so we're going to switch it to the other religion topic. Scott, you wrote a great blog post this week about the religion of low light over at Photofocus. I think you really hit on some great things there. As we're talking about these new cameras where people are looking at things, this seems to be one of those points of obsession.
Well, we've had religions in photography since we've had photography. It's nothing new. The most recent religion was megapixels, and now I think maybe we're going to start that again thanks to the D800. But
I'm waiting for 50 myself.
Yeah, the religion of low light. I mean, I get thousands of questions literally a week here at photofocus.com, and almost everyone about a camera is, how is it in low light? And I mean, excuse me, but that's just become like the only reason to buy a camera is because it's good in low light. Because I don't know about you guys, but me, I want oodles of light. I want big, big, big light. I want light everywhere. I want lots of light. So cameras like light. Cameras perform better in light. And yeah, I understand that there are some people that need low light performance, but this has gotten to be the religion. I mean, people were asking me how the Litro was in low light. If you're asking that question, you don't understand the Litro and you're on the wrong page.
Yes.
So, I mean, my big concern is don't evaluate a camera strictly based on its low light performance, because, I sold lots of pictures from the 3.3 megapixel Canon digital camera that came out 10, 15 years ago. I think that we've gotten a little carried away with the low light performance. And trust me, once this religion is done, there's going to be another one. It's just because people like to have something to hang their hat on. And, as far as I'm concerned, going back 2 camera models in either brand, the low light performance is already stunning and blows away anything I did for 15 years on film.
And the new Camera Raw is super good at picking up noise. You've got in-camera noise reduction. RC, you encounter a lot of people. You do a lot of training, both seminars and online. Are you seeing this come up a lot, or what are you seeing? Why do people get stuck?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm just like, guys, it's not called darkography. It's like you got to use light. I'm like, come on, man.
Somebody should tell Joe McNally he's doing this wrong. What are you bringing all those flashes for, Joe? He's just shoot in the dark.
Dude, we're going to go to infrared photography. We're all just going to shoot.
It's in the dark, baby. That's where it's at. It's like, but it's funny because you do see a lot of that kind of stuff. You know what it is? I think that truthfully, the problem is that the people expect the solution to be inside the box. People expect, to some degree, they buy the camera and they go, all right, I want to grab this camera and I want to go out and I want to go do X. And you don't really have a good formed idea as to what X is. So you'll just kind of shoot and you go out and you do this. And then you look back at your pictures and you go, well, they don't look very good. So obviously the problem is not you. The problem is some button or some switch that you haven't worked at the camera with. So I think that if you magnify that and you amplify that and you amplify that, we're just creatures that want to turn around and look at these things and go, well, if this one performs better than this one, then obviously this one's going to make it better. And we're always just trying to find what's going to be better, what's going to be better, what's going to be better. And we just lose context of that kind of stuff. Like, I use a lot of low light stuff. I play with low light stuff, but I tell people it's for a very specific reason. I married a ballerina. It's like I married a girl who used to be on stage when everything was dark and she jumped all over the place. There were very specific reasons as to why I shot in the dark. Or if you're a concert photographer, or if you shoot inside of weddings, you have to go back and you have to analyze, why am I asking for this? But Scott, I think you're 110% right. People just have gotten crazy about that kind of stuff, and hopefully it'll swing back. Hopefully we won't just jump into the next fight. Hopefully people will kind of come to their senses and just kind of go, all right, well, it's not about low light performance.
Piggybacking on what you just said, RC, I ran a poll on Photofocus a couple days ago, and I said, do you think buying one of the new hot DSLRs will improve your photography? And a third of the people said yes or maybe. which means we have got a lot of work to do.
Now, I think maybe was actually a better response. That's showing you're making progress. That means that, the marketing engine is not 100% successful in convincing them. I saw the same survey, a great poll, Scott. People, although it gave me hope that people didn't have unrealistic expectations that, oh, maybe I should take a class. Maybe I should practice. Now, Scott, after people do get their stuff together, a couple of our sponsors have some great things that really help people share their pictures. Can you tell people about those?
Well, SmugMug is the way that you do your professional photo sharing. If you want to sell something online, SmugMug has got deals now with multiple printing companies, so you're not stuck with just one. If you like a certain one over the other, they work with several. They host video that's uncompressed, still my favorite feature about them. Their terms of service are the best in the industry, so there's a way to go. Another way to share your photos and to have fun is to participate in a ViewBug contest, viewbug.com. And by the way, Photofocus, along with Kelby and a bunch of other people, is sponsoring a $10,000 plus photo contest at ViewBug. You can find more information about that over at the viewbug.com site. So those are two of our sponsors. If you're into photo contests, be sure to join ViewBug and be sure to enter our $10,000 contest. There's no entry fee for that, and there's no rights grab, by the way. And check out SmugMug for professional photo sharing. That's the way I like to do it.
I got to tell you a quick SmugMug story real quick here. Have you guys seen Camera Awesome? I know everybody's seen it.
It's my favorite iPhone app, period.
Holy shnikes, that thing is cool.
Yeah.
I'm like, I played with some SmugMug stuff and I did some stuff to it, but when Camera Awesome came out, I started playing with this thing and I was like, this thing is amazing. And every time I started it, it would say powered by SmugMug. And I'm like, you know what? I want to go back and take a look at my SmugMug account and take a look at what I've done or what I haven't done to it. So I'm in that process right now where I'm looking back at it and I'm going, you guys have done some really good things here, SmugMug. I got to start talking about you. So hats off to the guys at SmugMug. You guys are just knocking it out in terms of the app, but more importantly, in terms of what you guys are doing on your site. I mean, you're making it harder and harder for people to have their own website. You can do everything right in SmugMug.
Here's the quick thing I just want to run past you all. We're coming up on vacation time. People are getting ready to hit the road. Do we have any recommendations of places you love? I'm heading out to Valley of Fire for some quick shooting, and I'm going to be out in Palm Springs area shooting in the California desert next week. Any places that you just think, hey, you're putting a family trip together or you got a little time on your hands, this is a great place to go for a weekend? Some of your favorite spots. Let's start with you, Scott.
Any national park in the United States. They're all great. Mount Rainier National Park's one of my favorites. It used to be my home park. I live 3 hours from Zion right now, which is just amazing. Any place in the Southwest, you can do the tour of the whole Southwest. Page, Arizona for the Slot Canyons is one of my faves. I like going to the Grand Canyon. I know it's a little cliche for some. Arches National Park, the Delicate Arch shot, you want to get that in your portfolio at least some point in time in life. If you're a bird shooter like me, down there near RC and Fort Myers Beach is south of him, that's a great bird place right now, also over at St. Augustine. I mean, I just came back from Alaska where I was surrounded by eagles. There were so many eagles in my way, I'd almost kick them to get them. They were like crowding into my shot.
But to be clear, you did not do that because that would be bad.
I did not kick an eagle because that would be against the law. Well, actually, it wouldn't because I was on Indian land.
Oh, okay. So, and how about you, RC? You get to travel some of your favorite spots to shoot, either in the States or even worldwide?
For me, I absolutely love New York in the summer. I do. I'm just a city guy. I love being up there. So if you can get a chance to go out, you can fly into New York, shoot a couple of days in the city, and then just shoot up throughway. And in a couple of hours, you're in the Adirondacks and some of the coolest places. So you can just make a couple of day vacation just running through New York. So I would encourage you guys to just take a look at that. And you could tell I get very homesick. I mean, I love Tampa. Tampa's great, but when it comes to like right around this time, I'm usually just like, man, it'd be really cool to be in upstate New York, just kind of walking around the Adirondacks. That'd be a great place to be.
Great. So that's going to wrap up our show for the day. And those are some great places to go shoot. We'd love to hear from some of our listeners as well. If they've got any places they'd like to share, feel free to drop us a line at photofocuspodcast@gmail.com. We'd love some tips. And if you have some images you'd like to share, you can also post it to the Photofocus Flickr group. And Scott, if people want to keep in touch with you, where are some of the best places they can go?
You can check out my Twitter stream at Scott Bourne, and I've started posting some of my own pictures now because I'm trying the Trey Ratcliffe Creative Commons experiment. So I'm posting pictures at scottbourne.com with a little bit of trepidation and nerves, but I'm doing it.
And make sure to stop by and encourage him because Scott, you're a great photographer, and it's nice that you're sharing so much on the web so people can learn from you. RC, where can people go to find your stuff? We already covered your blog about rc.com and Kelby Training. Any other places they should look for you?
Yeah, you know what? Check it out on Google+. I'm spending a lot of time on Google+. So the best way to be able to go to it is just to go to GPLUS, so G+RC.com.
Great. Thanks a lot. My name's Rich Harrington. You can find me on social media at RedPixel. That's RHEDPIXEL. And love to hear your feedback if you guys have suggestions for future shows or things you'd like us to cover. For the Photofocus podcast, my name's Rich Harrington, and we'll see you in 10 days on our next episode.